Kevin was struggling. He had been out of work for 2 full years, and he had no confidence left at all. He was willing to take a $30,000 pay cut if he could get in the door anywhere. So I needed to show him what he had to offer, how to present himself, get him back to feeling confident in what he had to offer. So he started having really good conversations and very quickly landed exactly the job he wanted. And I was very proud of him that he got enough confidence that he was willing to try a little technique I showed him for negotiation that got him an extra $10,000 in starting salary. So I'm hoping to inspire a lot of you in what you can do to land that next job that you'll love today. So here's my agenda. I have a quick self-assessment I'm going to ask you to take. I'm not going to ask you to share your results with me. This is for your own benefit to help you zero in on where you need the most help. Then I'm going to go through the 5 secrets one by one. And at the end, we'll use whatever additional time we have for just Q&A. So as Ford mentioned, I have a career tips newsletter I put out to a large audience. It's free. So anyone who would like to get that, just put in the tinyurl.com, get John's tips, and that'll let you sign up. And as a bonus, what I'll do is I created a series called Building Influence that is very critical for the things you need to think about in building your network and in interviews. And so if you sign up for career tips today, I'll make sure to put you on the list to get that Building Influence series as well. So for this self-assessment, I'm going to read you 8 statements about activities that I consider very critical to any effective job search. And I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being an absolute novice and 10 being an expert. So number 1, I consistently pursue a clear, specific job search target. Number 2, I present a clear and compelling unique value proposition. Number 3, I have at least 20 concise, compelling accomplishment stories. Number 4, my resume is a strong sales brochure. Number 5, I secure at least 5 one-on-one networking meetings per week. Number 6, I gain strong referrals from every one-on-one networking meeting. Number 7, I secure the interviews I want for the jobs I deserve. And number 8, my interviews regularly generate job offers. So you should have rated yourself from 1 to 10 on each of these. And the way I want you to evaluate your ratings is if you rated yourself a 1 to 3, that's something that's really holding you back and you need to get help fast. You need to get a book, you need to get a coach, you need to go to a class, you need to find some experts who can give you advice. But you need to really get that rating up. If you rated yourself a 4 to 7, think about, okay, I've got some mastery. What can I do to improve on this? What can I do to really get this up to an area of mastery? And if you've got an 8 to 10, that's saying, I feel like I've really got this covered. So first assess that, talk to people, see, am I really rating it where it should be? And if you are, then that's an area that's potentially some hidden potential. And what can you do to leverage that? And I'll give you an example. Tom came to me and I have a slightly more robust version of this on my site. And he took that and we started talking about the results of it. And it showed that he felt he had real mastery in networking, but there was a disconnect in the ratings. And I said, Tom, tell me about this. So there's something going on here. He said, well, I have to be honest, I pretty much stopped because it wasn't leading anywhere. I said, okay. So for number 5, what if instead of you rating yourself on your ability to get 5 one-on-one networking meetings a week, I said your goal is to get 5 one-on-one networking meetings a week with C-level executives. And it's like this light bulb went off. He said, wow, if I could do that, that would be a game changer. And he left the meeting to go out and do that. And the next time I heard from him, he had landed as a C-level executive over in London. So you look for these areas of hidden potential that you can really tap into to move things forward. And so let's see if we can help you raise your scores on these points right here today. So the first secret to landing a job you'll love is you have to know your target. So if you don't have a goal, any path will take you there. And a lot of people go about a search without a concrete goal. They kind of move from thing to thing according to what comes up in front of them, and it's not a very effective way to run a search. So if you're struggling to figure out your goal, think about the three-legged stool, where one is your passions, one is your skills, and one is your life goals. Obviously, the sweet spot is this place in the center where they all align. But think about for a moment, which of these is the most important? Or are they all equally important? Is there a place you should start in this process? And I'm curious what you think. Just put in the chat box, skills, passions, or life goals, or all three, whatever you think is most important. Let's just get a sense of where people are on this. And I'm not seeing the chat. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I see passion, life goals, skills and passions, all three, skills, life goals. Okay, all important, but passion is critical for me. So we're getting a diversity of responses, and looks like the most common one coming up is life goals. Passion's a little bit behind that, which is a common result I see. Now I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 20 years now. And what I see all the time is people who start with life goals. And they went to medical school because grandma wanted a doctor in the family, or they went to law school because they assumed that that law school, once you have a law degree, you're set for life. They went into iBanking because they know that iBankers make a lot of money. And I meet them 10 years down the road, and they're really unhappy because they didn't go after something they were passionate about, and they feel trapped. So the problem with starting from the life goals is that it filters what you look at. And so when I started this practice, it's a good example of this. My son was in middle school. So in a few years, he'd be going to college, and we'd be, forking over Ivy League level tuition for him. My daughter would be following him a few years after that. We had the house, we had the car. And if I'd started from, I need a salary like this to cover all this, I never would have even thought about opening my own practice. But I had this passion for it. I knew I had the skills for it. I'd been doing it as a hobby for 5 years. And I said, I just have to do this. So let me figure out how I can do it in a way that will also let us put Michael into college and Beck into college and all the other things that we need on the side. So when you start from the passion, you're more in a brainstorming mode of how can I make this happen? And you may have to compromise on some certain things in the process, but you don't rule things out automatically because you can't imagine how they'll satisfy the life goals. And to those of you who are trying to figure out how to, uncover your passions, we will get to that. So the other thing, the skills are important, except again, they tend to be a filtering tool. So if you start from the passions, then you assess what are the skills I need to do to make this happen? What are the skills I have? And instead of saying, well, I've been doing regulatory compliance for a long time, I'm really good at it, so that's what I have to do. No, you figure out what you want to do and how you apply the skills you have. If you're not interested in doing regulatory compliance anymore, that should not be at the top of your resume. So I firmly believe that you start from the passions, then you figure out, how can I make this happen? What are the skills that I have? What are the skills I need to develop to fill in the gaps? and how do I do it in a way that meets my life goals? And that I find is the most successful approach. So how do you uncover where this intersection lies? Well, you can ask yourself some of these questions. When was I most satisfied with my career? What was I doing at that time that got me so excited? What types of projects most excite me? When have I felt the most productive? What parts of the projects, what parts of the jobs, what parts of the assignments did I really enjoy? If you're recently out of school or you've just done a graduate program, whatever, think about what classes or assignments really turned you on and got you excited, got you staying up all night to work on this thing, not for the grade, but because you were so passionate about that topic. And you can also look at the other side. When have you been least happy? Barbara Scher's written books on things like finding your North Star. And one of the exercises she promotes is come up with a job description for your job from hell. And then when you're all done, you can try and flip it on its side and see what you have. Now, there are also, I would say, 3 primary methods you can approach to start focusing on your goal. One is the thoughtful approach. You know, a lot of in your head, doing assessments, working with a career counselor to draw things out as to what the direction might be. And I'm not saying all these are valid. It can be a really helpful approach. There's a self-guided approach. And even though Dick Bowles died a few years back, his book, What Color Is Your Parachute, is still a terrific Bible for job hunters. And the flower exercise is a great one to help bring these out. Or the third approach that I've used with a lot of people is the active approach, the feedback loop, where you get out presenting as if you knew exactly what the target was. I mean, obviously, you have to do a little work to come up with a target, but you get out, you present it, you see what happens, and you see how people react. I talked to Ford about what I really want to do, and he's staring at me like I got 2 heads. I know something's not working. I'm presenting it wrong, or I've got the wrong target. Or he's telling me, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, and I can start evaluating, does this make sense to me? The more I talk about it, am I getting more excited or not? I'll give you one example. Patrick was a software programmer. Hated getting up in the morning to go to work. Wasn't what he wanted to do at all. But every time he thought about doing something else, he kind of fall back into, yeah, but this is what I know. This is what I'm good at. And I challenged him on what he really wanted to do. And it involved international operations, which you'd say, well, that's kind of a stretch. He doesn't have any fit for it. But actually, in his youth, he had an accident that made him a paraplegic. And he used the settlement funds he got to create a fund for rural school children. And he got this was over in China because he had grown up in Beijing, and he knew the government, he knew the players, he knew how things operated. He had a presence there, even though he'd been now living in California for a number of years. And so we put together his message, we put together his target, we put together how he would talk about it to people, got him out talking to people. And the next thing I know, he calls me up, he says, guess what? I met someone else who's equally passionate about this. We're opening our practice in Beijing the start of next month. I'm on the plane on the 1st. I've sold my place, and we're going to help companies set up their international operations. I'd never heard him so excited about something. And he's still over there as far as I know. So now that you've got an idea of where you want to go, create your dream job scorecard. Get really specific about exactly what it is. What's the industry? What's the role? What level? What titles? What duties? What responsibilities? What types of projects you most want to work on? What boss and management style helps bring out the best in you? Think about the company or organization. What does it do? Is it a profit? Is it a nonprofit? Is it an NGO? What types of products or services does it offer? How big is it? But more importantly, what is it about that size category that attracts you? What's the company culture like? Are there any specific companies you've come across that are really interesting to you? And what is it specifically about those companies that makes them interesting? And then once you've got all that down, now look at, go out to the salary sites and that sort of thing and see what sort of compensation does that role typically pay, and how does that line up with what I need or want? So now you're ready to go out and talk to hiring managers. Because hiring managers, I did all the actuarial hiring for my company for 13 years. I can tell you, if you're not focused, don't waste my time. Job seekers all the time come in doing what I call the job search shuffle. They're trying hard not to tell me exactly what they're good at, what they're about, until they know what I'm looking for. And what happens is, okay, you're basically waiting for me to give you the answers to the test so you can echo them back. And when you do, I don't believe you. Because if you were really that passionate about that particular area, that particular goal, that thing you could do, you wouldn't have hesitated to share it with me up front. So when you do share it with me down, further in the conversation, I'm very skeptical. I'm like, yeah, you're just trying to sell me what you think I want. And I once had someone who came in for an interview, a recruiter that I trusted had recommended him. He comes in, and after about 15 minutes, he said, I don't think this is the right role for me. I wasn't offended. We had a great conversation about exactly the role that he wanted. He wanted to be a product line manager. This was an officer level role supporting one of our product line managers. And the last person who'd been in it was now one of our product line managers. So I could draw a picture for how it would lead directly there. We had a great conversation because now I really believed what it was that he wanted. We developed a lot of rapport. And at the end of the day, my boss and I sat down and figured out the highest compensation we felt we could afford to try to attract him to my operation. So to summarize, the first secret, to know your target, you need to create that personal scorecard for your dream job, use it to focus your search. But most importantly, get off the bench. Don't spend tons of time in your head trying to figure out directions. Get out in front of people, talking to people. That's the only way you're going to make this happen, when you get in the game. And by the way, we're going to have a Q&A portion at the end of the call. If you have questions about the particular area I'm talking about at any time, feel free to put them in the chat box. Zoe or Ford will keep track of those. And if there's something that's really relevant to what we're talking about right then, I'll deal with it then. Otherwise, we'll make sure we get to them at the end of the presentation. So the second secret, now that you know your target, you need to know your value. You need to know what you are going to bring for that target. And the key to this is the stories you tell, because you need to express your value in stories. Stories are what engage people. I could tell you, hey, I'm a great career coach. And you'd be like, yeah, okay, he's full of himself. He's bragging. I'll be the judge whether he's a great career coach. Or I can tell you the story of Tom, who had 15 months of a steady stream of interviews and never a single offer. And a week after my winning interviews program, he was weighing 2 competitive job offers, one of which was higher than the posted salary range. And you might then conclude, oh, he must be a great career coach. So when you tell stories, it engages people differently and it's more believable. And it's what makes you unique. I can tell you all the things it takes to coach someone well, or all the things it takes to have a good career search. Well, you can look those up in books too. But the specific way that I've helped people is what makes me unique. The specific stories you tell are what bring your unique value proposition into the equation. So what you want to do is get listeners to care about your accomplishments. And that's the template I use for challenges, actions, and the results for the employer or for the client or for the customer. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by a powerful story that meets these criteria. And this is a real story. I always, take identifying details and names out so that, not violating any confidence of anyone. But this was a real story. So I was chosen as the environmental expert to assess a long-range chemical detection system. This system was designed to identify chemical agents that could put soldiers at risk. The government had already invested $1 billion, and any unaddressed environmental concerns could delay deployment and cost millions to alleviate. So I took 3 key steps. I scrutinized hundreds of environmental, health, and safety documents to identify even the smallest possible environmental issues. I addressed each issue directly with the assessment leader, and I resolved all environmentally related questions raised by any other member of the assessment team. In the process, I discovered that an analysis that's mandated prior to going live had never been completed. So I dove into it and developed the missing report. That missing analysis alone would have created a mass production delay, setting the system back 6 months and at a cost of at least $9 million. The assessment leader was so impressed that he invited my team to assess 2 more $500 million chemical detection programs. And that gained the attention of the Army Environmental Command leadership. But more importantly, it facilitates the timely fielding of systems that can save the lives of soldiers. So was that compelling? Did that grab your attention? Did that give some clear idea of what value he brought to the table? Good. Sounds like it resonated from the comments in the chat box. So that's what you want to do. You want to have 20 or more stories like this, short, relatively short, no longer than a minute, compelling stories that engage someone and make it clear what you did. Now, here are some points to keep in mind for your stories. More action creates less reaction. What I mean by that is the least important part of that story is the actions. The actions are the source of all the follow-up questions. Tell me how you did that. Tell me more about this aspect. So if you spend a lot of time digging into all the actions you took, you're going to create less reaction from the other person, less interest. And it's a very common mistake to make, but that's why in that story, he boiled it down to 3 key steps he took. If he'd said, let me tell you 20 key steps, the story would just drag. And that's where the person, when they can come back, they can say, tell me how you found that report. Tell me what you did to develop that report. You leave the interest there. Second one, provide general directions, not a detailed roadmap. I've written a lot in the past about, free consulting in interviews because it happens a lot. Sometimes it's inadvertent. Sometimes it's someone actually seeking free consulting out of it. But what happens is if I give you my 10-point plan for how I'm going to solve this marketing problem you face, one thing that happens is the person at the other side of the table says, okay, I got a 10-point plan for solving this. I don't need John as much as I did before. And you think you're giving me, look, I can do this. But in fact, you're giving me kind of the keys. Now, in fact, as the hiring manager, I probably can't execute that plan. It's because you developed this, the stuff, but I fool myself into thinking I could. I fool myself into thinking I could give it to Bill and he could now execute this for us. Second thing that happens is in that 10-step program, I guarantee you that there are 5 steps that are relatively routine and straightforward. So you've just shown me maybe 3 things that I say, those are really impressive. And the others are, yeah, everyone does those. So those drag it down in my eyes. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of routine stuff here. It's kind of like you're trying to leave some mystery. If someone hands me a Rubik's Cube and I say, wow, interesting. And I go, look, and I've solved it. You might say, wow, that's really impressive. If I say, oh, the way you solve this is you turn this 3 times and you turn this 2 times, you turn this 1 time, there you say, oh, he's just got a routine memorized. So this is part of tension management. And if in fact someone reached out to me recently to tell me about a situation where he had been asked for an interview to do a detailed marketing strategy for them. And they insisted that he do this PowerPoint. He'd be out of the running if he didn't do it, and that he'd send it to them the day before the interview. And he did. And then the day of the interview, he signs into Zoom. There's no one there. They ghosted him after that. They wouldn't respond to his emails. They were just looking to pick his brain. And unfortunately, he played the game. So the third concept, hard results are worth more. One of the things that I see all the time is people neglect to focus on the challenges they had to overcome to make something happen. And that is one of the most important parts of your story. If I pull from my own background, I tell you how at one point I was asked to put together a demonstration of the management information system capabilities that my company had for our parent company. And I developed this incredible system, went through thousands of applications to develop an entirely new methodology that let us pursue rate actions we could never have hoped to get approved before. And our parent was so impressed that they gave us $1.5 million of funding to take this to the next level. Okay, that sounds pretty impressive, doesn't it? How much more impressive does it sound if I tell you that the reason that I was asked to do this was because our parent company had lost faith in our ability to manage the business. And we were afraid that they were going to shut us down, take us over, we'd all be out of jobs if we could not show them that we understood how to manage our business. So when I put that challenge into it, the result of them actually giving us an extra $1.5 million funding to take things to the next level is in contrast to where we were at the beginning, that they might shut us down. So to summarize, the second secret, it's all about knowing your value and getting an employer to care about your accomplishments, and then going back, use that to evaluate that dream job scorecard we talked about in the first secret. You can look at it and do a gap analysis. Where do I have something that's critical to this dream job I want, but don't have a story to back it up? Did I forget to put together a story about my negotiation skills? Or have I never had the opportunity to demonstrate negotiation skills? And what can I do to fill that gap? Can I take on a volunteer project, get a consulting assignment? Or is this going to be so critical in holding me back that I need to take the step of a job that's not my dream job, but is along the trajectory and helps me fill this gap, so a few years later I can make the next move? So the third secret to landing a job you'll love is that you need to have an outstanding sales package. And I purposely call it a sales package. People don't realize a lot of times that when you're in a career search, you are now a sales and marketing executive, marketing your product. And for those of us like me, as I was an actuary, I was a math geek. I didn't grow up intending to be a salesperson. So that can be really jarring for a lot of people, but you got to get into that mentality. So think about, what are the critical marketing materials to support your search? So first one that most people mention is their resume. Or if you're in the consulting world, what I would call an engagement bio, which is a slightly different take on it. There's your LinkedIn profile, which today is absolutely essential, and it's got to be professional. So you should be going to those LinkedIn POW sessions that we're going to be running, because that'll help you optimize that profile. Because I guarantee you, any employer or networking contact that is looking at you before they meet with you they're going to have reviewed your LinkedIn profile. You need a cover letter, but instead of thinking of it as a cover letter, think of it as a marketing letter. You need a way you approach marketing letters. You need a way you approach emails that you write that presents value all the time. You need a business card. Now that we're going back in person in a lot of cases, nothing makes you look less prepared and less professional than being at an event and someone asks you for a business card and you either don't have one, or you're pulling one out from your last employer and you're crossing out information and writing something in on the bottom. They're so cheap to get. Just, make the investment. You can even go to vistaprint.com and you can get them for just the cost of mailing, or you pay, I forget what it is, it might be $12 to have them remove the ad that they put on the back, and then you've got a really professional set for minimal cost. Think about your email address that you're using. Are you using a very personal email address that's maybe communicating something inappropriate, or not I'm not saying totally inappropriate, but something that's so personal that it's like detracting from your professional image? Because you can go to Gmail and get one that's just your name pretty easily without any significant cost. So think about the email address you're using. Think about the signature you're using on your email, because having a tagline there that communicates value is really important, putting that in front of a lot of people. And then maybe you have a portfolio of sample work that you've done. So let's take the resume, because that's the big one that people are most often really worried about, and just break that down a little bit. So this is your sales brochure for your campaign. And, as a hiring manager for so many years, I'll tell you, the way I look at it, there are 3 questions you have to answer to grab my attention. First, does it have a strong professional image? Second, does it pass the 10-second test? And third, does it prove you will deliver? So the professional image, this is about showing that 2 things: that you care about your work and that you're capable of producing professional work. Either one of those could rule you out. If you either don't care enough about this document that you had the chance to sweat bullets over to get perfect before you present it to me, or you're not capable of doing that, either one of those, I'm going to be very concerned about your future work product. This doesn't mean you have to produce something that's got fancy fonts, that's colored paper, it's scented, anything like that. It just has to look professional, look like you care about producing something professional. The 10-second test is about, now I get this, I glance at it, I see it looks professional enough. Now you've got to have an opening that grabs my attention, that gives me a picture of what the package is I might be buying if I buy you, and get me interested in that. If you talk to recruiters, if you talk to HR people, you will find that typically they're going to tell you they only take a few seconds. Some will say they take 5 seconds. Some maybe take a little longer, but they've got this stack of resumes that they're going through. They're not going to take more than a very short time making that initial cut of, these are the ones that are worth reading further, and all these others are going into a big pile. And I guarantee you, by the time I get to the bottom of the pile, I've found the 5, 10, 15 that I'm willing to read further. I'm not going back to that big pile again. Now, someone asked about the importance of a professional email signature. Should you have a new one just for your job search? That's kind of personal preference. There's no reason why you have to have a separate one for your job search, but I would never use, if I'm working at, like I worked at Commercial Life, I would never have used my Commercial Life email address for a job search, because that would communicate a lack of professional standards on my part. So I'm going to make sure that whatever email I use, it's professional, and it's not my current company. So let me give you an example of this concept of passing the 10-second test. So again, this is a real example, the top of a resume someone sent me that said, objective, to utilize acquired skills, leading and supporting cutting-edge system development and implementation efforts to further my management career in financial services. The yellow parts are real red flags for me. First off, you're telling me at the top of your resume, this is all about you and your objective, not about what you can do for me, the reader. To further my management career. Okay, again, this is all about you and what you want. I will be interested in your goals and what you want further down in the conversation, but that's not how you get my attention to want to talk to you in the first place. To utilize acquired skills. What else are you going to use? It's wasted space. And then cutting edge. That now I grew up in the insurance world, and this person was actually in the insurance area of financial services. We're not known for cutting edge systems in the first place. But even if we were, what that says to me is, okay, you're the sort of person who always wants to work on the cutting edge of things and not on the routine stuff. So you might be a problem employee that every time I have to get something done that's not cutting edge, you're going to be balking at. So I interviewed him on what he really did. And here's what we came up with. A summary of qualifications, that he installs benefit plans under tight deadlines, maintaining and supporting them profitably. He streamlines operations to reduce expenses while providing outstanding customer service. He trains, coaches, and mentors staff to create an efficient unit and raise productivity. Now he's presenting a picture of what he might bring to the table for me, the reader, that might get me interested in talking to him. So now, the third point, prove you will deliver. This is where every bullet point in your resume needs to be speaking to results that you're going to achieve. So let me share, again, a real example of the top bullet from a resume someone sent me. Senior Customer Support Engineer. Created and propagated efficient communication, reporting, and process-changing network between sell-side analysts, research data vendors, and institutional buy-side, sell-side clients. Manage client relationships and expectations of data quality, scrutinized and suggested improvements in data delivery mechanisms, etc. Do you even have a clue what this person does? It's like it's so much jargon. It's hard to read. It's certainly hard to read out loud. It doesn't communicate value. But once I talked to him about what he really did, it was executed account management and customer service functions for 20% of the world's sell-side analysts in 15 research houses internationally, contributing to a 100% renewal rate and fourfold increase in sales over 2 years. If I'm concerned about our renewal rate, if I'm concerned about our increase in sales, if I'm concerned how our customer service and account management might be impacting those, if I'm interested in someone who's global, he's got my attention. I want to talk to him. These are the sorts of bullets you want in your resume that prove you will deliver. So to summarize the third secret, you want to have an outstanding sales package. You want to think like a hiring manager and consistently answer, what's in it for me, the other person, the reader, the listener. So the fourth secret, you want to network to the hidden job market. Now, if you respond to an ad or something on Monster or Dice or Indeed or a company website posting, how many people out there do you think know about it? Pretty much everyone, once it's posted. Everyone who's looking and has any qualifications related to that. So how many applications do you think are coming in for that position? And how many of those are getting forwarded to a hiring manager? Well, if as few as 200 were sent in and as many as 10 are forwarded to the hiring manager, what are the odds of yours being the one that gets through? This is very much like taking a piece of paper, sliding it under a locked door, and hoping the person on the other side decides to unlock it and let you in because of what's on the paper, versus someone coming around the side and saying, hey, Ford, come with me. Let's go up in the elevator and talk to someone. So what I was at a IEEE Smart Tech conference speaking, and someone put these points up on a slide, that 75 to 92% of jobs are filled through networking and referrals, and that 70 to 75% are never advertised. Well, I won't claim authorship. I won't claim that these are the right numbers. Let's say it's only 50% that never get posted, never get advertised. Well, if you are spending all of your time focused on posting to posted positions, you are missing out on at least half the marketplace. And the only way you can tap into that other part of the marketplace is through your network. So I would advise, limit the internet part of your search to at most an hour a day. Spend as much time as you possibly can doing or arranging for one-on-ones. Craft a strong message focused on results achieved and challenges overcome. Target at least 5 one-on-ones every week. Now, when I tell people that, initially they're like, oh my God, that sounds like so many. Hey, when I had a client who, what he would do, he was going into Manhattan to meet with people. So once he went in, as long as he was going to be there, he'd find several people to meet with at once. He'd go to his old company and meet with people there if he had extra time to fill in. So he would get at least 5 meetings just in one day by going into the city for a day. You could do the same thing in Philly or anywhere. You just, it just takes some work to start getting them going. And those one-on-ones get you so well prepared for interviews. You get to practice your messaging, you get to practice your stories, you get live feedback, and you at the same time equip people to be able to help you in your search. So the 5th secret is you need to avoid Q&A interviews. This guy took it a little bit too far, but he had the right idea. He wasn't sticking to the Q&A. So does this sound familiar? There are a minute or two of small talk. Then you're asked to summarize your background, and you bring out your carefully prepared statement. And then there's maybe 40 minutes of questions that you answer. And then finally, the interviewer says, okay, what questions do you have? And you have 10 minutes to ask questions. Sounds like a pretty standard interview scenario, doesn't it? If you let that be your interview as a candidate, you're not going to have a great deal of success. You need to break the pattern. You need to create a conversation that gets me excited about working with you every day, seeing you on the job. And so what you need to do is, for instance, finish every second or third answer that you give with your own related question. If you get in this cadence of doing that, not every question you answer do you do it, because you don't want it to become a ping pong match. But if you do it every second or third, pretty soon, this turns into a real conversation. And as Ford says, sometimes interviewers don't allow any time to ask questions. So if you wait for the end, you've missed the boat entirely. And never save your questions for the end anyway, because think about this. We're having this good conversation with you, and you're worried, you've got this zinger that you've been saving up, and you save it up for the end of the interview. And I say, okay, do you have any more questions? You ask this zinger thinking, you've just really impressed me asking a great question. I'm sitting there saying, This would have been a great question if he'd asked it 15 minutes ago when we had a lot of time to discuss it. We don't have much time. What's the deal? Does he not understand this is a good question? Is he just trying to throw me a zinger? What's wrong? What's wrong with his prioritization? So while you think you're asking me a great question at the very end, you're actually could be setting up exactly the reverse psychology. So most people, they save it for the end because they're worried that they'll run out of questions. I don't care if you run out of questions. If you've asked me really good questions throughout the interview, if we've had a good discussion, I'm not going to take any offense to you saying, well, no, you've done a really good job of answering my questions. I just have one left. When do I start? In fact, I had a client who he had a panel interview. And it went really well. There was some humor in the room, and they got to the end and they said, do you have any more questions? He said, yeah, I just have one. When do I start? He started the next Monday. Most importantly, make sure to dig deeply into the goals, the challenges, and the motivations that they have, because that's where the hiring decision is made. And finally, practice, practice, practice. You do not want the interview for the job that you really want to land to be your practice interview. Get friends, get people in HR, get coaches, whatever you need to do. Get the more practice you can do, the better. One of the things that I see happen all the time is that people are asked a question differently than the way they had anticipated it. And they get flustered, or they give the wrong answer because they never anticipated it coming that way. And the only way you get past that is by doing lots of practice and having people try to trip you up so that you start to get used to the different ways things come. In fact, I was doing a workshop one time for a networking group I used to run, where we did mini role plays, and I taught them some techniques, and then said, okay, now let's do a quick role play. And so I taught them what I call the hero story, how to tell me about yourself in a really engaging way, and then broke into these role plays. And I go around the room, kind of listening in on the different ones, and at one table, after the person gave her answer, I said, I just have to ask. We just went over the hero story, but you didn't use that. That wasn't the answer you give. Why was that? She goes, well, that's not the question they asked me. She didn't recognize that the way the question was asked was an opportunity to use her hero story. And you only get that by practicing a lot. So apply these 5 secrets to accelerate your search, to land a better job and pay, and to get your career on track. And just as a reminder, if you were interested in career tips and that Building Influence series, there's the link again, tinyurl.com/getjohnstips. And anyone who signs up today, I'll send you that Building Influence series as well. And if you're really, I don't have time, obviously, to do everyone in the room, but for the first 5 people who reach out, I'll be happy to do a complimentary Kickstart Your Career Search session. It's a 30-minute session to zero in on your goals and challenges. I'll send you a link to that more robust version of the assessment I mentioned that gives me a lot of insights I can share back with you about what's going on. I guarantee, it'll position you to take action. If there's a fit, I'll describe how we can work together to help you land that job and pay you deserve. But whether we move forward from there or not, I guarantee you'll get a lot of value out of it. So just send me an email at john@jhacareers.com, or I guess you could even put something in the chat box saying you're interested, and Zoe can always get me your email address. So that's what I wanted to share, and we can go to Q&A. Before we go to everyone else's questions, someone had presented 2 questions ahead of time, and so I wanted to make sure I hit these first. So the first one was that it's someone who's is employed at a place where the culture and product quality is beneath his expectations, and therefore he's looking for something new, but he's afraid that potential employers don't want him to criticize his employer. So how do I explain why I want to seek a new position after only a year and a half? And it can be tricky. This is really, there's a more general kind of thought around this of how do you explain a gap? How do you explain a negative in your background? And how do you do things without criticizing your past employer? Well, and you're right, you never want to criticize your past employer. So you see, how can I say this in a way that doesn't throw them under the bus? So you think about, what is it really that's going on? Is it that, hey, I got here and I realized that this place really doesn't satisfy my long-term career goals. I made a mistake. We all make mistakes, but you want to focus on where you want to go as opposed to why you're leaving. So it's like, yeah, well, I moved to this company, and after the fact, I realized it really doesn't fit my career goals for the long term. And that's why I'm here, because I think I can bring X, Y, and Z to your company. So you pivot quickly to what you can do, where you are headed, and you say little about where you were. I've worked with people who've gotten fired and had to talk about, okay, how do I deal with that? Well, okay, then it's like, what did I learn from this episode that I can share that will say this will never be a problem in the future? This could never happen again. So it's very context sensitive, but the core of it is you say little about the place you were and most about where you want to head and why you would be terrific for that. I can send you some. I think I have your email. I can send you some links to some things I've written on that too. And then the other question was about being in a position where the programs he built were destined for success but could not be implemented because senior managers misled retailers about the product specs. So I'm not able to demonstrate success. So how best to explain that without criticizing the employer? Now, there's a little bit, you might think about whether it comes across as criticism, but saying that, here's a program I designed and here's what it would have done. Unfortunately, the company chose to go in a different direction. But it's perfectly valid to use as your result what a project was projected to do, what would have happened if they'd followed your plan. That's a perfectly valid result. I'd rather have a result that I actually can show that we achieved something, but until I can point to that, I'm going to use what this project or this program is projected to produce or was projected when I created it. Because that happens all the time. You're at a company, you create something really good, but you leave before it gets implemented. So you don't even know. So your result in that case, the best result you can have is here's what it would have done if I had been there to see it through. So I hope that helps on those two questions. So what other questions do we have?
In the chat, we did have a question, which is, what if the reason you're job hunting is because you do not have super results, which is why you were laid off in the first place?
You have to think that's where you need to dig in really hard as to what value did I create? I'll give you an example. Someone I was working with years ago, she had worked in laboratory settings, and the projects that she had been on, the experiments, were failures. It's like, well, what can I say? The project failed. How do I explain that? And what I said to her was, okay, well, within the work you did on the project, Did you come up with anything that would apply to other projects that would make them more efficient? Did you come up with any new methods? Did you find ways to get to the negative result quicker? Because she wanted to go into biotech. I said, how many projects in the biotech world are successes and how many are failures? I want to hear that you actually can deal with failure. And I want to hear that you help us get to that negative result quicker so we free up the resources for other channels that we can go after. So you look for what are the elements of anything you did that might speak to a result you produced. It doesn't have to be a big one if maybe you don't have big results you can point to, but did you help other people be more effective? Did you do anything that reduced costs, that increased productivity, that raised revenue, that became a template for how they did business in future projects? Anything like that?
Great. And we have another question here, which is, how can I explain that I was passed over for the top job in my space and then stepped down?
Well, that has a lot to do with why you stepped down. I mean, this is something that you'd really want to explore with someone as all the details to then say, okay, now how am I going to explain it best? I don't know if whoever it was feels comfortable.
Yeah, if I
sharing.
can answer the question, it was
Okay.
I was my boss, who was the head of our function, was promoted, so his job became available, and they put me up for it and someone else up for it, and ultimately decided to go with the other person, and then they promoted me to a different area, which I didn't really want to be in as much, and I wasn't going to report to the other person, so I stepped down. And when I tell this to recruiters, they always get really interested in the other person, and they want to know her name and they want to know her title. And so obviously I'm telling it in the wrong way. So what's a good way to sort of explain why I left without having them focus then on the other person?
What did why do you think you were passed over? Let's start from there.
I think because the other person had better was more liked, so better social skills, and was more liked and made the boss feel better about himself.
Okay. I think in this case, it would be
less technical skills, more personal skills.
Yeah, I think what I would do is simply say, hey, I was considered for the top role. I'm disappointed that they didn't choose me, but here's what I would have been able to do in that role, and here's what I can do for you. So I would pivot pretty quickly to where I want to go and what I'm going to do for them, and kind of sidestep the rest. Now, if they have the follow-up question, well, why didn't you get it? Why did they pass over you? Now you think about what can I say that's not critiquing them, but just, it could be as simple as if they made a business decision. Now they chose someone who had X, but I make it really simple. I don't go into a lot of depth on that one. Does that help?
That's very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
So I saw the chat box. Apparently that link the tiny URL seems not to be working for some reason. So just put chat tips in the chat box, and I'll have Zoe get me your email if you wanted the career tips.
Yeah, I think for anyone here too, just letting you know, I did see the private messages, and I'll get John the list of the people who were the first 5 to reach out about that 30-minute conversation. So and it looks like the link may have worked for Baron. I think with some of those tiny URLs or bit.lys or all those ones, the capitalization and punctuation and all that matters. So we'll test it on our end and get the right one out to everyone. Because sometimes, if you put a capital T and a lowercase t, it actually is like a different URL completely. So I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone has any, please feel free to ask them.
let's see. I'm just scrolling through myself. I think there was someone. Oh, I have skills, but it's not okay. So we did cover how to uncover the passions. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? Because we can always give you back 15 minutes if you don't.
I have a question. How often do you see somebody that's maybe late in their career, compensation holding them back from pursuing their passion?
Oh, I see that a lot. But I see it because they're afraid that they're not going to get there, as opposed to they've actually tested the waters. It can be difficult but you won't know unless you really try. I mean, when I left the actuarial profession, I'd been an actuary for 20 years. I said, yeah, I'm kind of burnt out on the detailed technical work. It's not really what I want anymore. And I went to a career coach myself and said, Sue, help me figure this out. And in the process of figuring it out, I realized everything that Seagate, the executive outplacement programs, everything they were teaching me around career search came naturally. How to market yourself and everything. I actually started mentoring others, but I couldn't see how to make that my own business. And I didn't really see myself working for, say, Lee Hecht as an internal coach. I said, okay, but I'll think about that long term. This is a hobby, but I loved systems initiatives. So I went out to seek a systems role, and I had none of the traditional qualifications. I didn't have a computer science degree. I wasn't a professional programmer. I wasn't a project manager, didn't have systems certifications, but I had major systems initiatives I could point to that I had led or been integral to over the time. I just went out talking to everyone I knew and people they connected me to about this passion I had. And ultimately, I was at a conference in Montreal. Guy next to me says, what do you do? I gave him my little pitch. He said, oh, would you like a consulting assignment? Went in, had an hour and a half conversation with them, walked away with a consulting assignment that paid me more than my actuarial career had paid. So it can happen, but you got to be really focused and you got to say, okay, if it's not happening by here, I need to shift. But don't just assume it can't happen.
Thank you.
Someone just added one question in the chat box about how people in their 50s should amend the search to minimize ageism. And I'll tell you my initial thought is there is ageism out there, but it's not as prevalent as we think, because it's so easy to use age as an excuse for other things. A lot of times what we perceive as ageism is this person looks out of date, they're acting out of date, they're not up to date on technology, or they're acting like they're not up to date on technology. They're talking continually about how we did things back in the day, all these other things, or it even could be salary. I mean, I've worked with many people in their 50s and even into their late 60s, and they've landed. One landed it, she was 70 when she landed as executive director of a nonprofit. But a lot has to do with presenting yourself with confidence and not letting the ageism stop you. I mean, yeah, there are places that are going to rule you out. Don't even pay attention to them. Go for the places where they're not having that attitude. Yeah, don't put the year of your college graduation on your resume, but also don't go overboard trying to hide your age. So if I try to present myself in my 30s and I walk into an interview and they look at me, they're going to say, what's wrong? This guy was misleading us. And so I'm going to have this big disconnect right at the front. So I'm better off being open about what I am. I might not say my age, but I'm not going to try to hide and present myself as 20 years younger, because it'll come back to bite me later on. So I hope that helps. And I don't know, Ford, if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think you've touched on the main points. That was good, John. So folks, as we're wrapping up here, I want to thank Zoe for her help as always. And also on behalf of our co-chair, Ken Scher, and myself, I want to thank you for the opportunity to run the job search and career development subgroup for these several years. And once again, I want to welcome Rob Kroner and Bill Love as our two new leaders. I'm sure everyone will be in very good hands with these two fellows at the helm. So thank you again. Zoe, is there
Thanks,
anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, actually, we did get 2 more questions in the chat, but I first want to thank you for just your amazing leadership of the subgroup. Before the pandemic, they were putting on all sorts of events, and they were, no surprise, one of the first groups to embrace the virtual event format. And really, they've brought so many great speakers over the past 3 years. So I think all Beacon members, the guests that attend the programs can echo my thank you to you and Ken for just all your leadership.
Thank you.
And we're definitely excited to have you still remain active, although Rob and Bill will formally take over. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of Ford or Ken. And I also wanted to thank John for a spectacular presentation. Just judging by all the chats we've had, people are really interested in what you had to say. And for those who have to head out, great. But if you don't mind, we have 2 more questions, and maybe we can just get those done with before we hit the 1:30. So the first one is, how does one pick a career coach that is a good fit?
Oh, that's a whole nother presentation. I would ask them, I'd ask for examples. Tell me how you have helped people. Here are the things that I am most worried about. Give me examples of how you've helped people with these specific issues. I want a career coach, but most importantly, I want one who I feel a connection to. I feel a rapport. I don't want to be dreading picking up the phone and calling this person. Really explore, are there issues, the issues they deal with and the passions they have for what they want to work with people on in alignment with what I'm looking for. Because some coaches are really, they're coaches who are very focused on just resume and LinkedIn and cover letter. And if that's all I need, let me go to one who's really passionate about that. If I need someone who's going to do a lot of brainstorming with me on future career paths and possibilities, I want someone who's very passionate about that. Personally, I'm very passionate about how to market yourself and how to shape those ideas in your stories and your interviews. I'm not as passionate about spending lots of time on the brainstorming of directions. So I'll typically refer someone to a coach who specializes in that if they talk to me about that.
Thanks. That's a good point. And I think that's why there's more than one career coach out there, because everyone needs something a little different and everyone's going to respond to a different style. So that makes a lot of sense. And then the last question I see here is, what if you have a dream job, but you're told it's not available?
Well, it's not available at your company, or if people are saying there's no such job. Some of this, if it's that I'm told it's not at my, there's no such thing at my company. Okay, let me go explore other companies. But let me also do some digging, because just because this person tells me it doesn't exist doesn't mean I can't make it exist, or there isn't another possibility. I had someone I was working with who she had just been moved to a position that she wasn't excited about. She'd been in a leadership role that she really loved. She moved to another leadership role, and she's like, yeah, I feel like a fish out of water. I need to make a move. I said, well, before we do that, let's explore this a little bit. Let's create a plan, a networking plan, get you in front of women in leadership roles throughout your organization. And that opened her eyes to all sorts of possibilities at the company. And in fact, she wrote to me, she had made a move to their London office. And she said, I never would have taken the chance to do this. It never would have occurred to me until we worked together. And I'm just this has been such a great move. I feel so much better about my career. She's moved on from there to be the chief actuary at another company. But if you go out and you talk to different people, they have different perspectives, and you hit the right person who says, I really want to, I want to help you. Let's figure out a way to help you make this work.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.